Welcome back to This Day. Joining me now is Jerry Slusowitz with Pacific Financial Planners. Jerry, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Well,
I look for one of my favorite guests for sure.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate being here.
So I wanted to talk about you're on the cover of a magazine here.
Yeah, just recently, Sorbet magazine, they did a cover story about our money management system. I call it the SAFER system, sound advice for everyone's retirement. SAFER, a little acronym there.
Yes, wonderful. And we're going to be talking more about that today, about retirement. So what makes a successful retirement?
Well, I mean, people need two things, right? They need to have their health and they need to have some wealth to pay for everything. I mean, being 80 years old and flat broke is not a good situation, and being 80 years old and having a huge bank account and all kinds of investments and no health, that's not a good situation either. So it's that combination, having health and wealth, that's what you need for a successful retirement.
And so you are going to be at the Health and Wellness Expo coming up this Saturday.
Yes,
and so I guess at first it seems like, well, why a financial guy? But as you were kind of explaining, it kind of goes hand in hand.
Again, I use different approaches to money management. That's why it's the SAFER system. I use different approaches to marketing. I'm going to be probably the only financial guy at a Health and Wellness Expo. Well, why? Well, guess what? Your financial health is equally as important, as I just stated, as your regular health. So I'll be their financial doctor, so to speak, there. And there's also the mental health aspect of it all, too. They're saying statistically that over 50% of people who make somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 a year are worried about money. Can you imagine making less than that? It's like 70%, 75% of those people are worried about money. So there's only less than 5% of the population that makes more than $250,000 a year. So it's a big problem for a lot of people. And again, so for mental health, you want to make sure that your money is safe and protected and those type of things.
Absolutely makes sense. So is there a better way or a better system to retire?
Well, again, what I have is this 5-step retirement master plan. And it's really important that there's basically 5 areas that you have to make sure are taken into account. And when I meet people all the time here in the village over the last 30 years, I find that they're lacking in 1 or 2 of these areas.
And so you're going to be... You're doing both financial planning and money management and the 5-step retirement master plan. So, and this is stuff you're going to be going over at the next financial forum.
Right. Again, the basic concept is first, you've got to have a plan. A lot of people don't have a plan. They have a lot of investments. It's like a series of islands, like the Hawaiian Islands. There's just a bunch of islands out there, but they're connected by being a state. Well, what I find is people have investments, they have no idea why they have them. They have it because that's when they sold their cabin up in Arrowhead. They have another one because they inherited money from their aunt. You know what I mean? So that became, and none of them are really working together. So you have to have a plan for income, because once you give up your paycheck and you're retired, like people here in the village, most of them, some are still working obviously, but you don't want to, you've got to be able to have that money last, and you've got to have it produce enough income to sustain your lifestyle. You've got to be able to protect your assets from losses. I mean, the market last year was down 27% by the S&P at one point in time through the year. Can you imagine if you had $1 million and suddenly that becomes $730,000? I mean, how do you feel about yourself? Are you happy? Are you doing the same thing? Or does that cause that mental anguish, that mental stress?
It causes a lot of stress, if you're watching that on a day-to-day basis and going, oh my God, I lost this much today.
And they say, well, the market always comes back, it always comes back. And it does. Sometimes it takes decades. It does over history. And just recently, from 2000 to 2013, the market was at the same place 13 years later. And if you're drawing income off of that, say you're drawing 4 or 5% income off that money, off that investment, well, that's off the million, let's say $50,000 a year. Well, when it went down to under $750,000, now you're drawing a much higher percentage. It doesn't come back. And it's not that financial planners aren't telling you the truth, but they just don't look at the math. That once you're on an income strategy, once you're retired, and you can't go back to work, you need to have your principal protected and you need to have that income taken care of. And then there's things like taxes and then leaving a legacy and planning for health care. Those are the other three big tenets. And it's not that you need to buy long-term care insurance, but you got to have a plan for how you're going to pay for it.
So, okay, so you have the 5 steps of the retirement master plan. So how do you ensure that it's bulletproof for your income? How do you, what are all the, going into those 5 steps? One of the things we talked about last time was healthcare planning, including long care term. How do you, what do you do to plan for that?
Well, again, it's kind of a big math equation. I'm a nerd, I'm to say it here in this magazine, is that I'm an engineer by degree. And what we do is we do the math and we figure out what are your expenses first. And there's 2 ways to do it. Obviously bottoms up, and this is the best way for those at home doing it, is to figure out where you spend all your money. It's very insightful. If you've never done it, it's worthwhile. If you need to hire a bookkeeper, hire a bookkeeper one time and they'll put it together. They'll put categories and they'll show you with charts and graphs where you're spending your money. Maybe you'll find that you spend too much money in one area or another, going out to eat or clothes or adventures or whatever, based on your budget.
Figure out where you could, if you're overspending, where you can.
Yeah, and now other people don't. They
down.
have plenty of money, but it's still having that plan to have solid income to cover all those expenses, all of it. And then you start working the math backwards for health care, like long-term care. How much is it going to cost? Well, the average female stays about almost 3 years in a long-term care. It's a little less than that. And depending on where you want to stay, is it $10,000 to $12,000 a month, or are you going to do home care at $20,000 to $25,000 a month and multiply that by 12 months times 3 years? Where's that asset? Which asset are you going to use to spend for that? So we kind of look at everybody's situation. The other way to figure out your expenses is top down. How much did you bring in last year? How much did your bank account go up? If it didn't go up at all, it went down, then we can figure out what your expenses are without doing the figuring out how much is your cable TV and your cell phone. So there's 2 ways for me to figure that out. But once we have that number, kind of that old ING commercial, what's your number? Have your number of what your expenses are. How can we find certainty of income? Like Social Security is certain. If you have a pension, that's certain. But what other sources we can get? And that's what I kind of figure out from a money management perspective. And once that's covered, then we have what I call the 3 Ps, a plan, write it down, for participation, where are we going to get those returns, and protection. How's that money protected from losing? So when the market goes down 27%, you don't. My clients don't take those kind of losses because they don't want to. And people go, well, you can't predict the market. I don't predict the market, but I manage the risk. And that's the biggest thing, is that you actually can manage your risk. I'm going to tell you right now, it's very unfortunate. Most people in the village have no idea how to do that. So they need someone who's a professional, who's a risk manager that can do the financial planning, come up with their strategy, and then protect their money.
Okay, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then you said there are 3 types of taxes that's a key into this 5-step plan as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, tax sensitivity is really important. You want to make more money, pay less in taxes. I mean, people are always looking for the next Google or Microsoft or whatever that's going to go up tenfold. Well, one way to have more money is just to make sure your tax efficiency. Some stuff is taxed always, like if it's in your name or if it's a joint name with your husband or if you've got a trust, it's in the trust name. Every year you've got to pay taxes on your interest and on your capital gains. But other things are tax deferred, like your IRA. Annuities are tax deferred. But then some things are tax free. Like there's tax-free bonds, there's some insurance that offer tax-free income, and then there's Roth IRAs, which are also income tax-free. The money grows tax-free. And to be truly diversified, it's not just having some money in small companies and big companies and foreign companies, it's having money in all 3 types of those taxations to make sure you have a well-rounded portfolio.
Okay, all right. And then the next thing on it for estate planning essentials. What must you have for leaving a legacy?
Well, again, titling is the very first thing, and making sure that you know who your beneficiaries are. That's one of the simplest things. And people go, well, I know that I titled it correctly back in 1998 when I opened the account. It's amazing how these firms are always upgrading the custodians, like Charles Schwab. We were with TD Ameritrade, and then it went to Schwab. Well, some of that information gets lost. You want to make sure it's titled correctly of who you want the beneficiaries to be. You want to make sure that if it needs a trust, that you should have a trust, but not everyone needs a trust. You can put it in what's called a TOD or a POD, transfer on death or payable upon death to your beneficiary, and you avoid the Gavin Newsom plan, which is probate. So if you want to avoid probate and not be subject to the state, which is very costly, then you just make sure things are titled correctly and structured accordingly. And we help on all those counts.
Okay. And then you're going to be going over all this stuff, much more detail at the Financial Forum. That's coming up. When's the next one coming?
October 12th, Thursday, it's Clubhouse 7, 3 to 5 p.m. Coffee and cookies, bring friends. It's a pretty good camaraderie. It's a group discussion as well as a presentation. And again, the Health and Wellness Expo is this weekend, Saturday, 10 to 1 or something like that.
Yes, that's absolutely right. 10 to 1 in Clubhouse 5, the Health and Wellness Expo this Saturday. Awesome. Well, thank you. It's always great to get educated and to be reminded and learn about this stuff. So thank you for coming today. And
well, Bobby, thank you for having me. You're always
Absolutely.
wonderful.
All right. So please remember, if you'd like to get educated about Jerry's 5-step retirement plan, then please come to the Financial Forum meeting this Thursday next week, Thursday, October 12th, from 3 to 5 p.m. at Clubhouse 7. If you have any questions, you can contact Leslie Suslowitz at 949-461-5882. Stay with us. We have some great tips coming up with the Orange County Fire Authority. We'll be right back.